and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about the usage of tarot in the TV show Killing Eve. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. The best way to support the podcast right now is to listen daily, rate, review, and to follow or subscribe in your chosen podcast app. The next best way is to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/everydaytarot. I recently added some new benefits, so if you join at the lovers level, you get the ability to ask tarot-related questions, and I'll answer them on the podcast, and you'll be individually thanked by name on the podcast when you join that tier. If you join the Witch Bitch level, you'll get the opportunity to have an individual tarot reading live on the podcast. The link is in the show notes if you want to check out the Patreon. You can always go to my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot for all the latest information related to the podcast and to find images of the cards that I pull. If you're local to the greater Puget Sound area, I'd love to see you at one of my Let's Talk Tarot meetup group events where we bring some of our favorite decks and play around with tarot and oracle decks together. Our next meetup is March 10th at 5 p.m. at Township 20 in Sumner. You can use the meetup link in the show notes to check out details on that upcoming event. And welcome to Season 4 of the podcast. In the first season, I introduced tarot through talking about oracle versus tarot cards, myths of tarot, how to find a deck, reading for yourself versus others, and much more. In Season 2 and 3, I went through the major arcana and the 4 suits, one per episode. And this season, I'm talking all about tarot in pop culture. And as I said earlier, today I'm talking about the usage of tarot in the TV show Killing Eve. So the show has since ended. There are 4 seasons, and I'll give you a little background if you're unfamiliar with the show. So when Eve is recruited by an intelligence agency, she's put in direct path of Villanelle, a ruthless, efficient assassin. Though the mission is to kill her, the two women find themselves strangely drawn to each other. This is a story of assassinations, obsessions, and betrayals in the brutal world of international espionage. And that comes straight from the Killing Eve YouTube channel, which is put on by the show. So there will be spoilers for Killing Eve because this tarot episode actually happens in like the final season, pretty close to the end. So if you like the sound of the show and don't want any more spoilers or want to go ahead and watch it, pause now, go watch it. It's pretty great. And then come back when you're finished. But I'll be talking about episode 8 in season 4. And in this episode, Eve and Villanelle have been welcomed into the home of 2 welcoming travelers when they're in Scotland while they're waiting for a storm to pass. And they're there and they're kind of hanging out. The couple is reading tarot for each other, and then they sort of offer to Eve and Villanelle, like, hey, do you want us to read your fortune and see what your futures might hold? And there's a lot of stuff going on in the show at this point about plans for the future, and again, we're sort of getting to the end of the season, of the final season of the show, so there's kind of a lot up in the air. So that's kind of where we start. And so they agree, or at least Villanelle agrees, to get a tarot reading. And just sort of in general, Villanelle is much more like accepting of spiritual things. There's like a whole thread in this season where she becomes religious and is sort of trying to perhaps like what would be like the right way to say it, like absolve herself of her previous sins, because again, she's the one that's an assassin, and she was sort of born and raised for this, or like she started from a very young age, and so she's sort of coming to a head of like what that means for her, as she thinks about what she might want in a future in which maybe she's not an assassin, or when she can kind of like finish the job. And then we have Eve, who is the one that was originally recruited to kill her as part of this mission. And Eve is much more of a skeptic. I would just say in general, but certainly when it comes to like religious or spiritual things, and that definitely plays out in this episode. So I'll get into it. So Villanelle is very open to this idea, and the person reading for her does a past, present, future, so a 3-card spread, and she pulls the past, the Tower, and the reader says, like, that speaks to chaos and destruction in your past. Like, she says something like, does that make sense to you? And Eve, who knows a lot about Villanelle's past, just like laughs because she's like, oh, yeah, like, accurate, I think is kind of what's going on there. Villanelle doesn't really say anything. She just kind of is like, okay, she's like very receiving this information. For the present, the lovers come up in reverse. And so the person reading for her actually says, like, normally this would denote unity, but the card's upside down, so it maybe speaks for the opposite. Is there unresolved conflict in your partnership? And Villanelle and Eve right now are, throughout the entire show, are in a sort of like will they, won't they relationship. In the beginning, it's like will they, won't they kill each other? And then as the show goes on, it's sort of like will they, won't they be together? Will they, won't they be able to actually like have a relationship? How do they reconcile that given their pasts and how, but also how they feel about each other? And so this card coming up in this moment again seems to kind of make sense to everyone in the room, as like there's conflict going on. In this episode, they're making plans for the future about what Villanelle's going to do as sort of like, she doesn't necessarily know it at the time, but sort of this like final act. Basically, she's trying to take down like the assassin organization, or at least the people that led to a particular thing that happened. So it's sort of, again, it's like, okay, this is the present, like that makes sense. And then for the future, she gets the Sun card, and the tarot reader says, this is one of the best cards you can get. The sun is magnificent, it's holy. Whatever path you walk down, you'll be blessed with celestial light. The sun is life. And yeah, as this reader says, the sun is often seen as one of the most, if not the most positive card in the tarot deck. Um, like she said, it's about magnificence, it's holy. It is interesting that I was sort of trying to think about what this future card means, um, knowing the end of how the season goes, which I guess, again, spoilers, but Villanelle sacrifices herself for Eve to save Eve, and Villanelle dies at the end of this season, or at the end of the whole show. Or at least, yeah, I guess there's not going to be any more shows. So I was going to say that's what we're led to believe, but that's pretty much what happens. And so with that thought, there is this sort of like, there's a whole, like I said, like Villanelle goes through like sort of a religious like transformation. She gets baptized earlier in the season, or maybe right at the end of last season. She's sort of reconciling or trying to figure out like her own spiritual relationship and sort of how to like, yeah, reconcile the things that she's done in the past with who she wants to be, or sort of considering to herself like what might it be like if I don't actually think that I'm a terrible person. Um, and so I can imagine the sun sort of like being that again, like it can be very like holy, it's sunshiny, like she's sort of being blessed in this way. We actually like see an image of her, I think at the beginning of the season, where she like, I don't know if it's like a dream or something, but she basically looks like Jesus. And so that's almost like what I first thought of when they pull this card, is like this, like almost like, I don't, Messiah type character, or this sort of like, I guess for her, almost like rebirth, this like baptism into like being a person that cares about others, that would sacrifice herself for someone she loves. And then also in like her, I'll talk a little bit more about like the end of the season after this, but we sort of get this image of Villanelle at the end, when she is, when she's dying. She gets shot and falls like into a river, I believe, or yeah, they jump into a river and like she gets shot, and so there's like blood forming in the water, and she almost looks like an angel, or sort of like, I guess, like at peace, like again, like she's dying, like it's not a happy moment, but I was sort of trying to consider like what does this card mean in the context of the show, and like what I know happens in the future. But again, if you think about the wording, like holy, magnificent, blessed with celestial light, the sun is life. Like there is this aspect of like celestial, like maybe she's going like to the heavens, like, or just that like in what happens right before the end is like they do sort of, Villanelle and Eve actually like act more like a couple and like consider again like opening up to each other and being real and vulnerable, and like again what their life might be like if they were to be together, sort of without all this other like context of like the complications in the show. Okay, so that's Villanelle's reading. Just and she sort of takes that positively. And then Eve kind of like jumps in immediately after like Villanelle gets that card, and she's like, "Okay, like read for me." And the reader says, "Okay, like I can do a 3 card reading for you." And Eve says, "No, I don't want that. I only want the future. I want the last card." And then the tarot reader pulls the card with like a dramatic silence, and everyone's sort of looking around, and she pulls the death card. Um, and I would say sort of in the show, like this is supposed to, like we're supposed to be like, oh, okay, she's gonna die. like, okay, Villanelle has a future. It's the sun, and Eve's gonna die. Of course, interestingly, like as we know, like the death card is not necessarily about literal death, but often about transformation, about rebirth, about changing into like a true self, or like this not upheaval, but this like, yeah, transformation, and like a death of like an old identity or who she thought she was. And I would say that like Eve does go on this journey throughout the show of like basically the death of like who she thought she was, or like what the life she was living before she meets Villanelle. Yeah, I was gonna pull up a description of this that I saw. But yeah, it's sort of, I would say that like again in the show, I think we're supposed to think like, oh, okay, she's gonna die, like this is how it's gonna end. But really in the show, like we begun the show where Eve is she's married, she's in like a heterosexual relationship, she's lived sort of like a normal, like boring maybe life, or just like kind of monotonous. And then she sort of, I think there's this like part of her that sort of longs for more, that wants to like be more adventurous or take on more. And this is kind of like where we start the story, where she becomes obsessed with Villanelle, this assassin. Like she's tracking her, and she literally becomes like obsessed with like all of the information and everything about her. And then this obsession sort of turns into like, oh, actually, I think I'm like fixated on her. I like want her. I want to be with her. I'm like so intrigued. Um, and so I saw some people talking about that, like, Killing Eve was always going to be about Eve's transformation into the person that she truly is, which at the end of the show, like, I guess the people that they really turn into is that Eve sort of turns into this free person. Like, she loves someone, she loves Villanelle, she sort of like left her old life and went full into this one with Villanelle. She's finally able to open up. They're like very coupley in the last, like they go like on a road trip together, and it's very like sweet. Um, she like is dancing at a wedding on this last episode, and is sort of like free. Like she kind of is like blossoming as maybe the person that she was kind of always meant to be. And then Villanelle basically goes and kills the 12, which is like this assassin organization that has sort of been in control of her life this whole time, and has done a lot of other things that negatively impacted her life. And then in the end, Villanelle again sort of like sacrifices herself for Eve. And so it's almost like that Eve becomes this person that she really is. and like honors that, and Villanelle becomes perhaps the person that she really is, which is someone who's willing to die for someone she loves, or right, not just an assassin, but actually like a protector, or the one that does really care about people she loves. Like she's not heartless, I guess, is sort of like, and that is something that kind of like comes up in the show too. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting because I do think that, like, again, in the final season, it's trying to, like, the audience is trying to figure out what's going to happen. Like, the show is called Killing Eve, right? And so it's like you could jump to the conclusion that Eve is going to be the one that dies. And it sounds like the writers considered that. But really, it's Villanelle that dies in the end. Again, she, like an unseen assassin, fires multiple shots at her after she's killed everyone in the 12. Like, she thought she got away with it. And then she gets shot at. Both her and Eve jump into the River Thames, and the gunman keeps firing, and they hit Villanelle, and like in the water we see her like bleeding, and again there's sort of this like angel's wings of, and she's, the way she's floating is sort of this like, I don't know, like again perhaps like calling back to baptism, or like angels, or um like this person that Villanelle kind of became, and like her Jesus moment and her baptism, and like also finally getting, like, if we think about the sun card, like finally getting that like blissful moment together with Eve, which happens before this, but it's almost like, okay, we like did the things we had to do, we've gone on this journey, and now everything is like great, and we get to be together, and then of course like because it's TV, they kind of get that ripped away from them at the end. And so I know that definitely like a lot of people were upset with this ending. So yeah, there is sort of, like I talked about the title called Killing Eve, right? It wasn't necessarily meant to be literal, but it's like this metaphorical death of who Eve was when the series began. Again, like she was married, she, like, to a man, like she was in this kind of boring life or just monotonous. And Villanelle comes along and just like totally transforms like her life and how she thinks of herself. And yeah, like I said, I would say the audience was like not necessarily like super excited about this ending, right? You kind of get this will they, won't they the whole time with the relationship. And in the end, it's like, no, or it's like, yes, they will, but oh, one of them died. And so again, like maybe the death card is really about Eve's like rebirth. Um, and I would say it's not necessarily that Eve is going to go back to like the person that she used to be, even though Villanelle is dead. Like, I would imagine that this is like, there isn't going back. Like, she can only sort of go forward from here. And I would say like the major change that happened in her life was like she opened herself up to Villanelle. She became vulnerable. She allowed herself to like have feelings for her and accept Villanelle's feelings like towards her herself, and like playing this kind of like game and flirting and like being in this like relationship as well in a way that she never thought she had. And I thought that when I was just looking things up for this episode, there was an interesting quote from the actor Comer, who plays Villanelle, and she says, "It was inevitable. She's like a cat with 9 lives," talking about her character. What I loved about the moment was that at a really selfless act that she did that caused it, it felt right that in the moment she protected Eve. There was something about that shielding. I think that signified how much she had changed. She was trying so desperately to change at the beginning, and I don't think she ever realized how much she had, which is so sad. The moment really shows how Eve changed her life. So it's almost this like they both changed each other's lives in this transformative way. And then we sort of get this like tragedy by which like they don't get to be together, even though they did both kind of like come to this, like they both almost at the beginning were on two different sides of the spectrum of like characters or how they imagine themselves, and then they sort of come towards the middle, I would say, and how they view themselves and each other, and what like a fun, healthy, like I guess like captivating relationship can be like. Of course, there are aspects of it that are not super healthy throughout the show, but I think they really both like feel alive, like in the relationship with each other. Unfortunately, like sadly, they don't get to like have that for very long. We basically just get like a brief glimpse of it in the final episodes before like Villanelle does die. Um, so yeah, that's sort of Tarot in Killing Eve. Just a brief glimpse into it, but this was a show I loved, and so it was very fun to kind of dive back into it again and thinking about the cards and how they were seen. I would say if I'm rating this on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like super accurate tarot, like couldn't be better, and 1 is like like not great, like not great depiction, I would say maybe this one's like a 6 or 7. Like it's okay. I like that they did like a past, present, future spread. Like that's one I do all the time. That's very common. Like I would say that's a pretty like easy way to get someone like invested if they've never done tarot before. And then we do sort of get like, and it seems like the reader, knows reversals and that kind of thing. And then we do get like this again sort of like literal interpretation of the death card perhaps, or maybe that's kind of what they want the audience to think, and then by sort of like, I don't know, pulling the rug out from under us in the end with the other character dying, there is this sort of view now on that card as like, oh okay, like it was more about death of who she was and not like a literal death of the character of Eve. And I was going to look at what the Lovers Reversed could kind of be about. I talked about a little bit like unresolved conflict in a partnership, but I have this book now, Upside Down Tarot, How Reversals Add Depth to Your Reading. And I was just kind of curious what they talk about with the Lovers Reversed. So they sort of talk about that with the Lovers Reversed, there is this like perhaps it's like relationship ending, which like it sort of does. We sort of think that it's beginning, or like it's finally beginning, and then it kind of gets pulled again. The rug gets pulled out from under us. There is this sort of like aspect of like sexual attraction or passion that I think in this episode is maybe not present in that moment because they're sort of frustrated with each other, but we do get a lot of that passion like throughout the show, or the passionate phase is maybe ending. Again, I think they go through a lot of the like sort of obsession, like new relationship energy, like crush in the beginning of the show, and then as the show sort of matures, they start to imagine like what would life actually like maybe be like day to day if we were together and not just sort of like in this fantastical place. And thinking about what else in here. Like values and personal beliefs are the other things they talk about in this book under the Lovers Reversed, that maybe your belief system has changed, or like your original code of ethics or your values have also like changed or are no longer in place. And that's kind of interesting, like in thinking about Villanelle's journey, where in the beginning she sort of was like, oh, I don't care about anything, like I just want fancy things and I just want to live this life like sort of unburdened or like not tied down, and like where I'm like just completing jobs and like that's how it goes. Of course the jobs are assassinations, but she's sort of like trained for it and good at it, and so it seemingly she sort of like removed some of the um I don't know, compassion parts of caring about those people, and she's sort of focusing just like on herself and what she wants out of this. And then towards the end, we get more of like, again, a shift in values, or her questioning, like, what kind of person am I? Like, is this who I really want to be? Like, again, how do I absolve myself from the sins of my past of being this assassin and killing so many people, and sort of this complexity there. So yeah, I just wanted kind of to add that on the end of the episode, since we do get a reversal card, which is always kind of fun to interrogate because it's just a little bit more, I guess, complex a lot of the time. Like a lot of books talk about upright cards, and there's lots of interpretations of that, but for reversals, it's always a little bit more up to like interpretation because people just read them differently. Okay, so let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today on this topic. All right, and I recently got a new deck called Desert Illuminations Tarot Codex by Lindsay D. Williams. And so I pulled a card from there and I pulled the Knight of Chilies. And chilies in this deck are the equivalent of wands, again, like fire energy, because chilies are spicy. And so on this card, there's like a buffalo or a bison, and a woman is like riding it, almost like side saddle, as the buffalo is like jumping in the air, and then they're holding like a bunch of chilies in their hand. And so it says, a warrior woman fiercely rides a buffalo through the desert. She is harnessing all the fire and energy from the bundle of chilies she holds up. Her clothing is decorated with embroidered lizards, representing high energy and passion. When the Knight of Chilies appears in a reading, it is letting you know that you are completely gassed up and ready to go. You are filled with the drive of all the fire and energy in this card, allowing you to go forth with your plans quickly. Your vision is as clear as the cloudless desert sky. Embrace this energy and go forth. You can use this energy to bring about massive expansion in your life. This card's energy can become overwhelming, so be careful not to be too impulsive in your decision making. If you act first instead of thinking, you could wind up regretting your hasty decisions. All right, so yeah, you're ready to go, filled with drive. Embrace this energy and go forth and bring in that expansion into your life. That's what I'm hearing from the cards today. And links for the tarot decks I talk about will always be in the show notes on my website if you'd like to look at them or find where to purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.